So today we're going to talk to you. We're first going to start with a brief little description of the rationale for the development of interventions for adults with autism. We're going to talk first about some of the planning work we did for the Access program that started in spring of 2015. And then we're going to move into our description of the Access program and tell you a little bit about the completion of the first phase of the project. That trial, the Access trial, was funded by the UC Davis Behavioral Health Center of Excellence. So rationale for the development of interventions for adults with ASD. I kind of think that here I am preaching to the choir because I think you probably all know that adults with ASD as a group, at a group level, have poor social and vocational outcomes. They experience a very high burden of health and mental health issues. Kaiser did a study a little while back of a very large sample of adults with autism in their system and found that of any developmental disability group, depression, anxiety, and all forms of psychopathology, except one, were really higher in people with autism than people with other developmental disabilities. With the one area being, can anyone guess? Substance abuse. So I thought that was very interesting. But people obviously do experience a very high burden of issues. In most of the published studies so far, individuals with autism, adults with autism, tend to report low levels of life satisfaction. And a very big group of research now coming from the laboratory of Dr. Paul Shattuck and a very large longitudinal data set of individuals coming out of special education suggests that individuals with autism tend to disengage from adult roles. So they don't work at the same levels, they don't independently live at the same high levels, and their interpersonal relationships and levels of community engagement really diverge from individuals with typical development upon graduation from high school. Another really interesting point here is it's very frequently the people who are most able and who are functioning with the lower levels of support that do worse, because frequently when they leave the high school setting where they're receiving services, they no longer receive any services. So it's kind of a paradox. And it's a big problem. Patty Shutter has a wonderful slide that I couldn't find, but that shows the huge wave of people that have been diagnosed crashing into adulthood. So there's really a tsunami of adolescents that have been diagnosed with autism, yet we have very few empirically supported interventions to help both those that continue to receive services and those that lose their services. So this really troubled us. A number of us work in social skills intervention at the Mind Institute and have for a long time. And we used to work with only people up to age 18. But last year we decided to change that. And so we initiated something we called Ask Workshop. Adult Social Knowledge was Ask. And what we did is we didn't really have a curriculum for this. We had an empirically validated curriculum to teach social skills up to age 18, but we wanted to work more in the domain of adaptive skills that were appropriate to adults. So we took the Functional Adaptive Skills Training, or FAST training, which was developed by Patterson and colleagues at UCLA. It's an empirically validated and manualized intervention for social and independent living skills, really for middle-aged participants with chronic mental illness. It's a 24-week group of 2-hour sessions, and the groups were really co-led by paraprofessionals, which was important to us because we ultimately wanted whatever we do to be able to be translated out into the community where we wouldn't have to deliver it in a very intensive and expensive hospital setting. There was a lot of overlap in session materials from week to week, and this was intended to maximize generalization, which we also know is a problem for some of our individuals with autism. So we took aspects of this curriculum related to adaptive functioning, and we sort of blent it with our social adjustment enhancement intervention, our sort of social skills intervention that we've been doing for a long time. And we incorporated organizational skills training, and we gave every member of the group an Android tablet to use to learn skills. Other things that we did, some of the people that we were serving were the similar kids who'd worked in our social skills program, so we wanted to make it a little different and novel. So we moved them into the boardroom, gave them PowerPoint presentations, used the androids, as I mentioned before, to sort of help to get them to the level that they could function as a lot of young people do now using technology. We tried to help them make more transition-oriented goals. We had them organize group outings with each other to help them generalize what they learned into the community, to bond with each other, and to plan, to learn better how to plan things. And we included in every group meeting time for social interaction and relationship development because we'd seen that that was so critically important for our students in our social skills program. And we were also fortunate at that time to partner with the SED, Steve was the group leader for the parent group that accompanied the young adult group, and we leveraged a lot of the programming of the SED. So people had support groups, but then they also went and they were able to attend the programming of the SED that covered some of the areas that we're discussing here today. So we first had to recruit, because it was not funded at that point, people from our clinic. We had 13 participants, 11 of whom had autism spectrum disorder. The other 2 had other forms of developmental disabilities. One was a genetic disorder, and I forget what the final one was. We had 2 women in our group. The age of the individuals was 18 to 24. We were happy to recruit up to 35-year-olds, but we didn't really find anyone who was in their parents' insurance or was a regional center client who could participate. 70% of the individuals were ALTA clients, and 40% were people that had been in our social skills program previously. And they were of all functional levels. So we had 1 individual with intellectual disability, 2 with borderline cognitive functioning, and 3 who would be considered to be high functioning. And the curriculum we designed at that point really focused on planning and organizing. And so the first module included an introduction to setting goals, an introduction of the Android tablets, and we did, I must say, spend a lot of time working with people to teach them the Android tablets, and this was kind of a surprise to us. And whereas we'd heard so much before that technology is loved by all people with autism, we found that many of our folk with autism really didn't like technology. We heard things like, I don't believe in technology, I'm old-fashioned, and I'd rather say things to people in person than have to send emails. We also found people who really didn't like the operating system of the Android and were very loud and vocal about that as well. So it was not the slam dunk we thought it was going to be. But nonetheless, Tasha persevered and taught them 2 programs that are very useful. One is a to-do list program called Wonderlist. The other was a calendaring program. I think we did Google Calendar. So that was about 8 weeks, and we also discussed during that time goal setting, priorities, and planning. Our second module was about social skills and interpersonal communication. We used aspects of the FAST curriculum here, and we talked about different types of conversations, some of our social skills work, building conversations, nonverbal communication, communication styles, and assertiveness from the FAST curriculum. And we finished with communication skills and community engagement skills, including whether disclosure is an important thing, a little bit about basic rules of work. We did some mock job interviews, which were very well received, and we talked about social media. We concluded with a focus group where we asked participants to give us their feedback. So for the pre-pilot, we had several major outcome measures. We had adult behavior checklist, which is a common measure of psychopathology/problem behaviors in individuals with typical development in autism. We had a quality of life scale. We had an executive functioning scale and just a general community ability scale that was rated. These were all rated by either participants, trained raters, or parents and participants. Keep in mind, this was a very small trial that consisted of 13 people total, and there was no control group. So this is very, very preliminary. But one thing that we did find that was good was that individuals with autism, when they were asked about their own planning and organizational skills, reported that they had less attention problems after the intervention. And that was at a statistically significant level, p less than 0.5, with a large effect size, meaning that that was, a respectable kind of a finding. We also saw at a lower level of significance that there was a reduction in depression from the beginning to the end of the program with a medium effect size. And finally, there was a very small, in terms of statistical terms, but if you look at effect size as a medium effect size in how people reported their social relationships did, and they reported that they had improved. So based on that, we felt encouraged, and we also conducted a focus group, and we found from the young adults themselves, they really liked meeting others, the job interviews we did, getting out of their comfort zone and routine, help with organizational skills, and hearing each other's interpretations of social interactions and situations. They didn't like the emphasis on technology. They couldn't quite figure out how to communicate with others outside of class, and some people felt that the intervention wasn't advanced enough. But overall, they said, basically, everything is really good with this group. The parents reported that they really liked connections with other parents, support that they received, resources that they learned about, learning from others, and Steve Reuter. They liked least that there was poor communication with the young adult group. Very much by design, we set up the groups so that they were quite independent. We talked about different topics, basically, in the groups. And that was pretty much our first attempt at trying to help parents and children develop more mature relationships where children are more independent. And one really interesting thing we saw is that there was an extremely wide range of tolerance for granting independence to the young adults, ranging from, parents who almost always went everywhere with their adult child and spoke for him all the time, to one person who said, oh yes, he developed a friend online, and the person lived in New York, and he wanted to go visit him, so I let him go. Oh yes, he didn't have a hotel when he got there. That was kind of scary to figure that out. So it was really, really wide range of acceptance of granting independence versus not. So, but we're still really grappling with that as being something that we think that young adults and their parents need to really work on if they have a disability, trying to figure out what the best, most comfortable, appropriate level is. But nonetheless, they reported that one reported, my child's gotten so much more out of this group than from social skills. He didn't like the tablet, but he really enjoyed planning outings. It made me hopeful. It was very reassuring to see how many of the kids are doing really well. And my son seems more relaxed in social situation. His overall demeanor's more relaxed, and he's more ready to go. He loved coming to the program. And I've seen my son become more vigilant. He loves to come to group, and he's more independent through the use of Wunderlist and calendaring. So basically, we did some good things, but there were still some problems. So on the right track, we realized the importance of group activities, we think, to build interpersonal connections. It seems that if we just lecture, that's not useful. We have to really facilitate social interaction in the groups, help people to bond with each other for the material to really be learned well. We were able to change participants' perceptions of their own organizational skills, and we were encouraged by that. And members and parents reported that they were generally satisfied with the groups. We felt we needed to work on the technology piece, the measures that we'd selected. We also found that working with a very wide range of IQ was difficult in the groups because the level of the abstract conversations was way, way, way in excess for some of the individuals in the group. So we decided to run a more homogeneous group on the next go-round. And we found that parents and adults were not always working well as a unit. We also found that many of the young adults were anxious, and we began to think that maybe some of the anxiety brought about by that transition to adulthood was something that we really needed to address to help with that problem of withdrawing from adult roles. So now I'm going to let Tasha tell you about the Access program that we ran this year.
Hello. Okay, so One thing that really stood out to me when I was leading the ASD program 2 years ago was anxiety. Anxiety seemed to be a really critical component that we needed to incorporate more in how to regulate anxiety in our participants, because I realized it affected every aspect of their life. And if we're expecting them to go out and get jobs, if they're too anxious to even do that, maybe first what we need to work on is helping them regulate that anxiety so that they then can move on to the workforce. So in addition to my own observations, clinical observations, the research really suggests that anxiety is one of the most common clinical problems among both children and adolescents with autism, as well as adults with autism. A recent study found that even 50% of adults with autism have clinically significant levels of social anxiety. So a recent meta-analysis was done, and what that did is it looked at a variety of studies that had already been conducted using intervention studies using cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for short. And CBT is it's one of the most common ways to treat anxiety. It's a very efficacious treatment. And these studies actually looked at it in the ASD population to see, can it really apply to this population? Does it work for this population? And the results from all those studies are very promising and suggest it is an effective means for treating anxiety. So the goals of the current intervention, as Marjorie said before, we are really interested in helping adults with autism engage in their community, engage in the workplace, engage in their friendships. And as part of that, first is helping them cope with the stress that comes along with all those aspects of life. So we added more of a CBT component into the curriculum. And then we also focus on helping them develop and maintain social relationships with peers. We also focus on how to help them, really function in the workplace and discussing various aspects about being in a workplace. And then lastly, we also really want to incorporate social coaches, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. But this is someone close to the adult with autism who knows them very well and can act as a support system in their life as they go through these different stages, such as into the workplace. So the ACCESS program, ACCESS stands for Acquiring Career, Coping, Executive Control, and Social Skills. And since that was a mouthful, we decided to call it ACCESS. So for the ACCESS program, we really saw it as a program that could be used in conjunction with other forms of treatment, such as job coaching. We also want it to be for it to be delivered in the community, that you don't need all PhDs to deliver this. So this is something we can really spread and distribute across the nation. And we also wanted co-facilitators who could be trained by one or two specialists and trained to do this work with individuals with autism. So next, I just wanted to cover some various aspects of our curriculum so you get a flavor for what it was like for our participants. And several of these slides are actually slides that our participants saw in the program. So first, there are several important parts to ACCESS. First, we met for an hour and a half weekly for 19 weeks, and we're actually modifying this a little bit for the next group coming in. We have one leader for the groups, and then also for the group that met with the adults with autism, there were co-facilitators or co-leaders that helped as well. So a typical schedule. So on a given day, we would always first review last week's topic. So we really wanted that fresh in their memory so they could see some continuity between the lessons. And then we would next go into life practice, which I'll explain more in a minute. But what that is for the previous week, they were supposed to focus on incorporating the concepts they were learning into their everyday life. Okay? So now they're not just students in class, but this is real life skills they're learning to apply in their everyday life. Next, we would cover the lesson for that day, so the new concepts they were learning, and often would share a snack. And then we would have them generally do an activity. Oftentimes, we would break them into small groups, and it's also a great way for them to bond as a group. And then lastly, we would talk about the upcoming life practice. So an emphasis was placed on working as a group, okay? And we really initiated that from day one. And we also learned from our Ask curriculum, the one previously, how important it is to give that sense of bonding and that this is a safe environment from the get-go. We really wanted to make them feel comfortable that they could learn from each other, that they could share with each other, especially their challenges in life, things that were causing them anxiety. We also taught them about how to use constructive feedback. This is something everyone can work on in life, and not just critically analyzing each other, but how do you help each other and give them feedback to improve. Also, working as a group, so in a group setting, really gives them a chance to practice skills that you might need in small groups, such as working at your job. Oftentimes you're going to have coworkers and you have to work on group projects, or as a college student, you're working on class projects together. Also, it's an opportunity for them to get a sense for what it feels like to be, with peers and respectful relationships and growing and learning from each other. And with the hope that some of the, relationships they make during this experience move on to friendships later in life. So before I go into this, I just wanted to play a clip from a family member so you can kind of get a sense for what their experience was like being in a group setting. So this is it's a social coach. So as I said before, we had the participants with autism in one group, and then the social coach, who was the individual close to them, who helped support them in a separate group. And this is a comment that was made.
I thought that this was an incredibly non-judgmental group. And not only non-judgmental, but I would go beyond that and say people were really supportive of one another's. And I think that we've all experienced judgment from the greater community regarding our parenting skills and our children and ourselves. And so that aspect of this, I think, really contributed to the bond, and it enhanced the whole experience.
So just get a sense for really how they emotionally experienced the group. And so each week they would be given 6 life practice assignments. So for 6 days, they would do one life practice each day. And again, these were we really wanted them to take the knowledge they were learning in our group and extend it to their everyday life to see, how do I apply coping skills, stress coping skills in my everyday life, for instance. And so here's a comment about what the effect of life practice had on the relationship between the social coach and their family member in our group.
So I thought that the whole life practice model was really useful. There were several times that I looked at the life practice and kind of presupposed that I knew how the response was going to go, what the feedback was going to be, and was very much surprised. So that was kind of a wake-up call for me to not be too, assumptive with regards to how things roll, and to actually listen and pay a little bit more attention.
So this was really an important lesson I think many of the social coaches learned, to really listen to the adult that they were helping support, the adult with autism. And many expressed how it created a sense of equitability, where before it was more of a hierarchy. A lot of times the social coach was the parent, but now they started to see their child actually more in an adult role. Other important parts of access. As I said, the social coach, most of them were parents, or we did have a couple spouses or close others like boyfriend. Similar to a good coach for any team, a social coach really helps the participant in our group practice the skills they're learning. The social coach actually learned the same material as the participants with autism, and it gave them a common language or jargon to discuss these different concepts like stress coping. And it really provided a chance for them to experience each other in new ways and, more mature ways too, again, creating more equity. And for some of the families, they really experienced a deepening of the bond between the two because of these really rich conversations they were suddenly having, that often when you live with someone, it can over time become a little more superficial. You might talk about daily things, but less so about really emotionally what's going on, or how are you managing, how are you really handling your life. Other important parts. So the first day, we go into detail about the group rules. We learned this is a really critical component. You want to make these clear up front, especially the concept of confidentiality. So maintaining the confidence of the group. So not sharing what you're hearing in a group with other people in your life. And I think that really expressing that up front, and that's an expectation of this group, really helped them feel more comfortable disclosing in our group. There were many other group rules, which I won't go into right now, but they should be on your handouts. So every adult in our group is required to have a paid or volunteer job for approximately 4 hours a week. So this was also an expectation of our group. Some came in with volunteer positions or jobs, but not everyone did. And this really helped some grow in different ways they hadn't experienced before. Also, some of the individuals in our group were students, college students, and so for those, we would allow them to do fewer hours of volunteer work experience. It did provide a real-world work setting for us to discuss different problems that would crop up in this environment and how to manage it, the problems you're experiencing in your real employment. And additionally, this is something they can write on their resume. It can help them in the future obtain that job they were hoping to get. We additionally provided letters about the program that the participants, if they wanted, could give to an employer to see this is a program they're in currently and they're working on a certain set of skills. And this is one of the reasons why they're reaching out to this employer to start working in their company or organization. So next I would like to discuss the curriculum topics we covered. So the introductory lessons were about 3 in length. We first, as I said before, we talked about the group rules in the introduction day. And we also have a group bonding activity, which we found to be pretty powerful. We asked them to write a timeline about their life. And the great thing about this timeline is they got to express some of the challenges they had, as well as the achievements. So they got a sense already that, wow, others have challenges and have faced hard times, but they also have many great accomplishments and talents too. Additionally, we discussed core skills for working in our group, social circles, which I'll describe in a minute, and also giving and receiving feedback, which I'll show you our visual for that as well. So first, for social circles, this is the diagram we showed them, and if you all see at the bottom, down there at the me circle, the orange circle, we explain, well, if that's you in the world, the further you get away in those circles, the further you are in closeness to these individuals. So as you notice, close family and best friends are in the red circle closest to the me circle. And then helping professionals, like a therapist, is in the next circle. And the further you get away, the further you are from how close you are to that person, but also many other things too. So, for instance, how much personal information you might disclose to the person, right? So the further you are away in these circles, the less you tend to disclose about yourself. Also, as I said, the strength and nature of your relationship changes as you get further away in these circles. And then the consequence of rule breaks is different. So with close friends and family, as we all know, we can get away with a lot. And with strangers or our boss or professor, you can get away with much less. So really understanding consequences vary depending on what social circle you're interacting with. We try to use visuals as aids. A lot of them explained that it was really helpful. It helped them really imagine it. And when they went out into the workplace or they were talking to a friend, that visual can kind of come to mind and they can work their way through it. So here's another visual we use, which people really enjoy, the constructive feedback sandwich. We had many jokes about this. But really the first thing we talked about is at the top here of the sandwich, is when you want to give someone constructive feedback, you first want to point out their strengths. You don't just jump straight into criticizing, right? Which most of us have a tendency to do. So in a kind, caring way, you point out the things that they are doing well. And then next, you talk about specific ways that the person might improve, okay? And we talked about, behavioral things you can actually change, and specific. So not like, wow, you need to just get better at this, but exactly what could you do to improve, okay? And then lastly, we talked about always, restating what you appreciate about the person, their strengths you see, and then how, if they take your advice, it might help them improve. Okay, so couching these in terms that make people feel respected and appreciated, and obviously if our participants learn to do that, they're modeling that in the world, so they're more likely to get that back too. And as we all know, in many settings we've been in life, like from a professor or a boss, oftentimes they go straight to the criticism stage, right? Or maybe the meat, and they kind of forget the outside pieces, which are really important. So next I wanted to talk about really what we call kind of the stress coping or stress management pieces. So this is more the CBT part of our curriculum. So there are 8 lessons involved in this one. And I just wanted to quickly describe briefly some of the different aspects of it. And then I'm actually going to show you some slides from the curriculum so you can see it. So first we introduce this concept that we react to different situations. And our reactions can either be helpful to us and help us achieve goals, or it can actually hinder us or be unhelpful. So we use this language a lot of helpful and unhelpful. Many people found that language helpful, and the reason why is because typically in life, especially I think for individuals with disabilities, especially with autism, they're often told, like, you're supposed to do this for other people. So that's not appropriate. So socially not acceptable, and they're constantly hearing, you need to change because of us. So we focus more on what can you do that helps you and that helps you achieve your goals. So we discuss that, and then we talk about avoidance. So oftentimes when we feel very anxious about something, we all do this, our go-to is to avoid. Well, if I don't do it, I won't be anxious about it. So we discuss how we often use that as a coping strategy, but not a very functional one. Then we discuss how to identify your feelings about anxiety and depression, and using techniques such as relaxation techniques to reduce your anxiety. And then we really get into more of the meat of CBT, discussing negative thoughts you might have about yourself that really lead you to feel anxious, and then react in unhelpful ways, such as avoiding something that you really need or want to do. And then we discuss, how do you catch these negative thoughts that happen so quickly? And we call these thinking traps. And then, again, we're enhancing their knowledge about, all right, how do you stop from falling in these negative thinking patterns or thinking traps? And how to use more realistic thinking. Okay. So this is actually one of the slides that they see, and this is when we're describing kind of situations and how one could react to a situation. And then again, this is introducing the concept of theory of mind, or people can react differently to the same situation. But it also introduces the concept that you can choose to react differently to a situation. So maybe naturally this is the way you would react to it, but you could maybe change the way you do that, and it would be more functional in your life. So as an example, let's say the situation is the bus breaks down on your way to work. So your reaction might be to call a family member to give you a ride. Okay? Another situation might be your supervisor assigns you more work than you can handle. Right? Reaction, you quit and storm out of work. Okay? So you can start to see there's already sort of this balance of, is this helpful or unhelpful? Another situation, the professor is explaining a new topic and you don't really understand what he's telling you. Reaction, you leave class early. Another situation, your new friend is angry with you because you forgot their birthday. Your reaction, you buy them a card and you apologize for forgetting. Okay? So we just introduced this concept of, start paying attention to how you're reacting in the world. And then along with that reaction is, are you avoiding things that make you anxious? So many of us probably know this, that if you're anxious about something, if you avoid it, you immediately feel better, right? All that anxiety inside just kind of starts to release. However, there are long-term consequences to avoiding the things we need to do or want to do in this world. The issue is, because you feel better, though, if you avoid, it's easy to kind of slip into that mode and just keep avoiding things. And I think this is one of the reasons why we see so much disengagement in adults with autism, kind of disengaging from the world around them, because there is a lot that goes on in their life that creates great anxiety for them, okay? So what they're doing is kind of slowly pulling back, till they're really isolating themselves. So we really talk about the importance of, approaching and not avoiding, and how approaching allows you to reach goals. And we created this diagram that shows, let's say you have a situation or a goal. Avoidance actually moves you away from that goal, okay? But approach moves you toward that goal, right? This concept of avoidance, it's tricky for all of us because we're all very skilled at it, and you would be surprised at how many ways you might avoid things without realizing. So it's a hard concept for anyone to grasp, and this is one of those lessons that I think they get into it, they practice it over time with their social coach, and it seems to kind of seep in over time. And you start to notice all those little ways you avoid things in life. We discuss about, the positives of approaching. Approaching really allows you to achieve new goals in life. You get practice learning new skills. And because you're putting yourself out there, you might be faced with new opportunities. You're opening doors you never knew existed before, right? But if you literally go home, you're starting to close all those doors that could be open to you. So in addition to talking about kind of the reaction side of, the avoidance, we discuss anxiety and how do you know when you're anxious. We talked about different physical feelings, and some of these are associated with anxiety, some are more associated with low mood or depression. And then we try to put some of these different physical symptoms near the part of the body where you often experience it, right? Like blurry vision. This is when one gets really anxious. They might get kind of blurred vision. When you're really tense, you might clench your jaw. You can have difficulty breathing as you get more and more anxious, okay? So we're making them aware of their physical symptoms, because once you become aware of it, then you can do something about it. We introduced the concept of relaxation tools as a way to start managing these physical symptoms of anxiety that one might experience in life. We went through a few different ones: belly breathing, so deep diaphragmatic breathing, muscle relaxation, peaceful place, and then also some other tools we asked them to discuss. Well, how do you guys relax? Take walks. I walk my dog in the park. I listen to the music I love. I play a video game. So we talked about various things like that. So this is the diagram that they all came to know and love. And as you can see, we broke it down here where we had situations, okay? So let's say that example of you're not understanding what the professor told you in class, all right? So what's a possible thought one could have about themselves? Like, wow, I must be dumb. I'm not getting this, okay? So how might someone react if they have a negative thought like this, okay? They might react by leaving class early. So this was introducing the concept that often these anxious thoughts or these negative thoughts about ourselves lead us to do things that are unhelpful in life, okay? And then we introduced this concept of, what if you use more realistic or positive ways to think about yourself in the world around you? So, well, others might be confused too. It might not just be me. Then, as a reaction, you are more likely to raise your hand and ask the teacher to clarify, okay? Again, now we're leading down a more helpful pathway. Regarding sort of these negative thinking patterns, we introduced a few different key concepts. These are called thinking traps, and this is the diagram we used for them. And we gave them fun names just to make them a bit more memorable, and jargon that they could use and play with and when they're talking to each other about it. So the first one we called Big Bad Trap. This is when you only see the negative in a situation and you ignore the positive. And all of you, please don't be surprised if you notice any of these in yourself, because we all have them, okay? It just, if they start getting out of control, that's when they really start to mess and interfere with your life, all right? So this is the glass half empty, not full. Worst case scenario, I'm sure we've all done this, where you go to the, oh my and it gets out of control, and the worst thing ever is going to happen. So kind of that worst case scenario thinking pattern. Strict judge trap, which we also ended up adding the term perfectionism. So a lot of people understood it in that way, and many of you who work with adults with autism or children even probably see a lot of perfectionist tendencies, a lot of rigidity, and that really helps many with just kind of loosening their rigid thinking styles. And this is really, instead of, having these unrealistic rules about the way things should be, or it has to always be this way, kind of, again, loosening up that thinking pattern. Future failure trap, this also is really common in our group. This is when you make a mistake or fail at something, and now you predict for the rest of your life you're going to fail at that, and you might even get to the point where you think you're going to fail at many other things because of it, right? So this is then making them feel less competent in their world. And when you feel less competent, most likely what's going to happen is you're going to disengage. The blame game trap. So this is when someone might either have a tendency to blame themselves, for things that happen that really might be out of their control, yet they attribute it to themselves unnecessarily. So then they start feeling really bad, like everything in the world's problematic because of me. On the flip side, there are some individuals who actually blame others too much, so they never want to take accountability for their own behavior. They want to blame everyone else for the problems. So here is just a little sound bite from some participants in my group who talked about their experience with thinking traps.
I learned how to address problems at the time and remain calm and function well if there's a change in the day or the plan. Just kind of how to realistically think about things. It'll take some more practice, but at least I was able to be aware of when I was in a thinking trap or something, and that maybe there's another way to think about it.
So we really got into this concept of reframing the way you think about things and coming up with more realistic ways to view the world and view yourself. So we discussed how thinking traps really make you feel bad about yourself. They make you feel anxious and discouraged, or like you're not good enough, and they really can get you down in life. And then again, those things lead you not to try out new things. So kind of combating these negative thinking traps or these negative thinking patterns really can help you then engage in the world. Okay, so then the next set of topics, really this is now coping in your everyday life, so in like a work setting or maybe in maintaining friendships. So this entailed 9 different lessons. Okay, we first talked about kind of problem-solving skills, how to set goals, and when you encounter a problem, how do you overcome that problem to continue toward your goal? The problem-solving entailed also how to plan and organize. We discussed giving and receiving feedback at work, as well as just in your world. Meeting new people at work and in life, and how do you engage in a coworker, and issues around becoming a friend with someone who's a coworker. We discussed developing relationships, especially friendships. Core workplace rules, and this one, as well as the next, discussing more complex rules in the workplace, I think was very eye-opening for some to really think about the workplace as having rules, as well as having, different cultures in a workplace. And then we ended with a graduation ceremony, which was a lot of fun. So I thought I would briefly talk about problem solving and kind of how we introduce this concept to our participants. So we discussed how once your thinking has become more realistic based on those tools we gave them, those anxiety coping tools, and when they use those relaxation tools, they feel more relaxed, more calm, stronger. They can then really start focusing on tackling problems and reaching their goals in life instead of avoiding. We discuss how one healthy reaction to challenging situations is to set goals and create plans to achieve those goals. So we actually embedded this kind of in this model they already were really familiar with. So let's say we had a situation at the top that was challenging to them. And, once they kind of get over any realistic or unrealistic thoughts they might have, any of those thinking traps, and they come up with more realistic thoughts, then they're really able to focus on their body and making sure that that's relaxed, use relaxation if they need to, calm down any anxiety they might have. And then that can lead them to react in more helpful ways. In this case, setting goals and planning out steps, using small steps to do that, or creating a sort of a to-do list of long-term plans. And then getting them to focus on one step at a time and making sure that they sort of reward themselves as they go along. I think all of us have plans in life, right? And sometimes we get so in the routine of working toward a goal or, that plan that you forget to really congratulate yourself as you're going along, as you're moving toward that goal. We also wanted to be realistic with them. We're all going to fail at times, right? We don't want them to go into any situation with 100% belief, all situations I will be successful at. That's not true for any of us. But just because it might feel like you didn't accomplish the goal you wanted, we wanted to make sure they don't see that overall as a large failure. We talked to them about it's really a learning opportunity. And again, sort of reframing the way they think about it. So we discussed how, practicing something, really pushing yourself out there, taking that step forward, gives you practice to get better at something. So let's say riding a bike, right? No one usually gets on a bike and rides the first time, okay? But the more you do it, the better you get at it. So the practice is a really key component here. And we talked about you kind of learn the size of steps that work best for you, right? Some people can take a large step toward a goal, and some need to take smaller steps to obtain that goal. And we discussed how it doesn't matter if it's a large or small step you're taking. What matters is you reach your goal at the end. We also discussed the feedback sandwich. So we kind of brought it back and then explained, not only are you going to be the one giving feedback sometimes in life, but you're going to be receiving feedback in life too. And that often can be a really hard thing to do. And so we really wanted to break that down into pieces. How do you receive feedback from someone? So we talked about listening carefully, sort of this idea of active listening, okay? And making sure that you summarize what the person's telling you. One issue oftentimes that can happen, especially if there's some processing speed issues, is that an individual might not capture every single thing someone's telling them, although they think they did. So by summarizing back what you did hear and did understand, gives your boss, for instance, or your professor the opportunity to say, oh, good, I'm glad you got that, but make sure you add these other things too, okay? So, summarizing back what they heard, and then thanking the person, in the moment, trying to regulate that emotionality they might be experiencing. Sometimes it's hard to get feedback for people. And tell them, you'll listen and think about this when you go home tonight. And then we discussed the concept of, taking a step back and really ponder it over the next couple of days. Sometimes it takes a while for one to really digest feedback and understand the importance of it. And we talked about, if you're really getting stressed out about this, use some of the tools we already discussed in this group. And then we said, use that tool of taking small steps in the workplace, for instance. If your boss gave you feedback about what to do, start working toward that, to improve. Take into consideration that feedback. And then we talked about the importance of going back to your boss or perhaps your teacher several weeks later to, get some feedback again. So you approach them, you initiate. Don't wait for them to tell you you're doing something wrong. But say, hey, I've been working on this. This is what I've been doing. Are there other ways I can still improve, right? So this oftentimes will really gain the respect of your coworkers and your boss and others around you. Another key component we talked about was the friendship continuum. And, So friendships, oftentimes one thing I noted, and this was also some work I did too earlier in my career, is that the concept of a friend, it's complex, right, for all of us. And oftentimes the depth of friendships is not fully understood by individuals with autism, and really discussing it in detail. What is the difference between an acquaintance? What is the difference between that and sort of a casual friend, someone you're starting to get to know, versus a close friend or a best friend? We talked about how having each type of friend is enjoyable. It's not just, you want all best friends. And I jokingly said, would you really want 1,000 best friends? Like, I can't handle that many problems in life, So, you want more acquaintances than close friends. So understanding, too, kind of that difference. Friendships can change over time. We discussed how a lot of times people conceive of it as just going one direction. You start off as an acquaintance, go to casual friend, and then you become close friends. But as we all know in life, sometimes people might do something to sort of betray our trust, and that might start pushing them back down to casual friend or acquaintance. And those can vary over time. They might prove to you they can be trusted again, and they work back and gain your trust. And so really understanding sort of the nuances of that, I think, is really important. And then we also wanted to explain that friendships take time to develop, that you can really like someone and feel like you click with them, but still that those first few meetings might feel great. It doesn't make them a close friend and someone you should necessarily disclose to immediately. And this brought up a little bit about issues around disclosure and how much you tell someone about yourself. We brought back the social circles, and we talked about, where do kind of friends fall in this area? So, we have strangers, and then kind of acquaintances are more down here. And as you kind of work your way down, you're getting more towards closer friends in the circle. The next thing we discuss about friendships is how do you deepen a friendship? So let's say there's someone you've met, an acquaintance in a club you go to, and you really like them, but how do I make them more of a friend, a deeper friend? We talked about first, there's levels of closeness or intimacy, right? You don't want to invite them to go on a camping trip for 2 weeks in the forest with you. That might freak them out, right? And so part of the process of developing the sense of closeness in a friend is first, wherever you met that person, let's say in a club, you try to do something maybe nearby, but it's still removing it a bit from that context. So they're starting to understand, even though we know each other in this club setting, it doesn't mean this person's like a close, deep friend. And part of it is bringing them out of that setting, and that kind of creates a deeper bond with that person. So maybe take them to the coffee shop next door, or if you're on campus, maybe go to the student union, okay? And then as you do that a few times over, then you can slowly move into situations that might be more intimate, like going to the movies or going mini golfing, doing fun activities with them that might be further away from literally where you first met them. And then as they really gain your trust over time and you learn, you just disclose a little about yourself and you see like, oh, I can really trust this person. They're not telling others. They seem to care. They're listening. They check up on me. As you're developing that friendship, then you can move into more personal experiences like going on vacation with them or that camping trip for 2 weeks with them. We talked about some tips for deepening friendships. First, how to, be a good friend and make others feel like they matter to you. Always remembering what's important to them. Ideally, you want a friend you have common interests with, right? But you need to also understand what they care about too, and you acknowledge that. Ask for their opinions or their advice or their insights. It shows that you respect them. Listen well to what they say and comment on it. So really that's showing that active listening of, I'm not just standing and staring, but I'm really processing what you're saying and I care and I'm reflecting back what you're saying. If they have problems, sometimes you can offer to help. That's partially what we do as friends, is we emotionally support each other. And sometimes physically support each other, like help them move, for instance. Again, do your best to stay in touch. That's that initiation piece, that approaching. So you're not waiting for them to call you all the time. You call them, or you text them, you Facebook them too. So looking for that reciprocity in friendship. We talked a lot about that. Are you the only one reaching out, or are they the only one reaching out? It really is a two-way road when it's a friendship. One thing we really wanted to discuss with them is this concept that someone can be friendly, it does not make them your friend, okay? And you do have to be aware of people who might want to take advantage of you, all right? So if they start asking for money, or they ask you to do like their classwork for them, or just something else that makes you kind of feel a bit uncomfortable, that's starting, you need to be more aware. Is this someone really a true friend, or is they trying to use you for a certain purpose? We discuss, standing your ground, making it clear what you are and are not comfortable with when someone's speaking to you as you're developing a friendship, okay? And I'll play a clip from someone in my group who discussed kind of her understanding of friendships and how this lesson helped.
I think the biggest thing that I learned from this lesson was how to identify who actually can be a friend, because while someone might be friendly, they may not be a good friend. Like if they start asking for money, or they start asking you to borrow their stuff, and you start getting little red flags because they're not giving you anything back. It just helps identify when you can cut off a relationship if it's not going well, if it's not going to be a good friendship, and knowing when someone can actually become a good friend, because you can tell if you can actually trust them with your stuff and your life.
Okay, so you can see that this was starting to introduce these really important concepts about, what is a friendship and what to be aware of when you're making a friend. And then we started working more into workplace issue lessons, okay? And we introduced this concept of 5 core workplace rules. We discussed having a can-do attitude, so don't come into class all grumpy and like, I don't want to be here attitude, but really like, what can I do? How can I help? Listen more than you speak. This is an important concept too, because oftentimes, especially some on the spectrum, have a tendency to talk a lot. And this is a reminder that when you're in a group setting, you need to make sure that, if you're the one dominating a group conversation all the time, you might need to sort of back up and give everyone their own sort of space to speak too. We discussed this concept of paying appropriate attention to detail. So what do we mean by appropriate? This is sort of, might not come easily to some on the spectrum. And again, with that perfectionist tendency, what is appropriate? And we just described, this is a great time to start getting feedback from your boss. Am I doing this at a speed that's good? Or am I going too slow? How can I speed this up? What can I do to change this? Do not harass coworkers. This is something we're adding into our next piece. But, again, this kind of intersects with this concept of paying attention to social cues. And we did discuss that to some extent, too, in some other lessons. But how do you know when someone is interested in talking to you or not? Are they too busy? Are they giving you signs they don't want to talk right now? Are you starting to bother them? And then it's important to find a trusted person who can give you advice. We said, don't pick a friend who's never had a job. Make sure it's someone, for instance, in a job setting that, has had maybe a job for many years and has worked in different places, who has a variety of experiences that you can really talk to about this. And then lastly, show you work hard and you're polite and you're a helpful person. The next week, we gave them more complex rules, and these rules were about culture in the workplace. And these are unwritten rules. It's when you walk into a building and you see how people are dressed, right? We talked about the importance of hygiene, the importance of the work ethic. Some places, you think of Silicon Valley and they play ping pong and they do other fun activities together on their work break, but somewhere else might not do something like that. Like Amazon, it's like, no joke, you don't laugh, you don't take breaks and you work till midnight kind of a place. So it's sort of that work ethic, what's expected of you. Communication style, do they like to communicate in person with each other, or do they, use emails, kind of paying attention to what is the modality and to what extent can you email and about what can you email. Expectations for treating coworkers. Some places are more family run, right? That you have that family feeling, you're very close or very bonded. Other places are extremely professional and private. You don't talk to each other and disclose personal information. So what kind of setting is this? And then ways of socializing. Again, as I described, we envision some Silicon Valley places as just being really fun places to socialize during work. So kind of paying attention to what is and is not okay in terms of socializing at your workplace. So this is another clip, and this one is very quiet, so I hope you can hear it, but this is a comment on workplace culture.
That culture can be referenced to jobs as well as to your living environment. That never occurred to me, even though I've worked more than once before. I've never really thought of a culture in that sense of the word itself.
So he was just kind of expressing, like, I never really thought about workplaces having a culture. You think about countries having a culture or a region, but it was sort of this new concept of, workplaces all have their own culture, and some of them just came back to us, the next few weeks, and were like, wow, I actually started paying attention to the culture and, describing the details of what they noticed and observed, and them saying, like, oh, I really like this culture. I didn't realize it, but this is why I like it. And we discuss, paying attention to what it is you do like about a culture and to find a workplace that suits you well. So now we'll get into a bit about the research side. This will be more brief, but to give you some background on, what we were really assessing in this study. Okay, so we had 41 participants with ASD, aged 18 to 38. They all had a verbal or full-scale IQ of 70 or higher. So we did not include individuals with an intellectual disability, although some did have issues with processing speed issues. They all were assessed for autism spectrum disorder using the ADOS-2. And they were randomized into groups, but we also randomized them based on IQ and age, and actually as well as gender. We didn't want all the girls to end up in one group and all the boys in another, for instance. We had a treatment as usual group, so this is what we call waitlist control. These are the individuals who did not get active treatment right away. They're getting it starting in about a month from now, okay? And then we had two groups who went directly into active treatment, okay? We just finished treatment in the intervention in June, and my research assistants have been furiously entering data so we could have some data to describe to you today. We had one group held Tuesday evening, and we had a second group held Wednesday evening, okay? And then the treatment as usual group, as I said, will receive treatment this fall. The participants with autism, that's the groups I led. I had co-facilitators that helped me run the group activities. They were really great because they would do role plays for us, so really show them some of these behaviors we're talking about so they could see it firsthand. So the student to staff ratio was 3-to-1, and Steve Reuter led the social coach group, and he did not get any help, but he doesn't need any help, so. Okay. So the design, in our mind, this is an experimental therapeutics trial, and so our axis intervention, we saw that there could be two different mechanisms, or what we call mediators, that really might impact the outcome of our participants. So we thought cognitive control, or the way you're able to regulate your own thoughts and feelings and behavior, and then also sort of anxiety as well. If we can sort of target these here through our intervention, how might that help them socially? How might that help them with their adaptive functioning as well as vocational functioning? Okay. We had many outcome measures. Again, this is a preliminary study to really help us understand what are the best outcome measures to use. I'm not going to go into detail about these outcome measures. I wanted to include them on this slide so you at least get to see what there are in case you are interested in it. But suffice it to say, we did look at social functioning through a variety of different measures. We also looked at vocational functioning and adaptive functioning. And most of these were self-report as well as informant report. So the informant was actually the social coach reporting on the participant with autism. And then the potential mediators, one was anxiety. We had a variety of anxiety measures, including the ADIS. And the ADIS is a semi-structured clinical interview we use for anxiety. But Connor Kearns and colleagues developed an autism addendum. And so this is to help us diagnose anxiety in individuals with autism. Okay, because oftentimes the two get confounded because they look really similar sometimes, and to really tease apart what it is about them that's causing them to avoid. Oftentimes, when you see a child, or an adult with autism avoid a social situation, the assumption parents make, for instance, is he's really anxious about it. He doesn't want to do that, okay? But it might not be necessarily always anxiety that's driving it. It oftentimes is just this lack of social competence. They think, well, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to keep that conversation going, so I'm just not going to do it, okay? So it's not necessarily being fully driven by anxiety. So this measure helps us kind of tease those two apart. And then cognitive control, which we use the automatic thoughts questionnaire. This graphic is really, the text looks very small, my apologies, but I just wanted you to get a sense for what we did. At the end of each session, we had the participants evaluate that lesson for the day, and it was to give them an opportunity, also at the bottom, it's not here, a comment section to tell us what they did or didn't like about that lesson to help us further develop the curriculum. And in general, this was on, I believe, a 6-point scale, and we usually were in about the 4 range. So they're liking it. They're saying this is good. And we asked a variety of questions like, today I enjoyed group very much. Today the activities were interesting. How did life practice help you? Things like that. We also looked at fidelity. So the leaders and the co-leaders all completed a questionnaire at the end of each session. And this was a scale from 0 to 2. And we were just rating how well we implemented the lesson. Okay, the active ingredients, the major parts of the lesson, were we actually doing them or not in the group? Okay, and out of a 2-point scale, for instance, the participant group leader was rated at a 1.85, and then the Wednesday group a 1.9. So pretty high, as well as for Steve's groups. Again, we're rating really high on fidelity. So it means we are implementing it as expected. I just wanted to briefly show you some preliminary results. These are hot off the press. First, we had a focus group. We did this at the end of, it was the last day, right before graduation. And we asked the participants a variety of questions about, what was useful? What did you learn that was useful? Like, what should we be keeping? What lacked clarity? How could we improve this? And so this we heard from both, and you'll see here where it says PT. That means participants with autism, and SC stands for the social coach, okay? They both were telling us they wanted more sessions, so 19 weeks didn't feel like enough for them. They also described that they wanted more time spent on each concept in order to reiterate the material and reinforce it, and to give them more opportunity to practice out the skills they were learning. They also really wanted more lessons on social interactions and really how to deepen those friendships we talked about, and the different aspects that go along with that, like initiating conversations, maintaining conversations. They said the visual models we used, remember we showed you like the feedback sandwich, those sorts of things they found really useful and helpful. The social coach and participants, because they both learned the same material, I gave them topics to discuss each week. And the social coaches especially expressed how much this helped them really deepen their relationship with the family member they were supporting in this group. And not only that, but then my participants were expressing that it really made them feel like there was more equity in the relationship with their social coach. So again, it was helping them engage in more adult roles and create more of an adult mindset too, and have the social coaches sort of acknowledge that. It really was also a great opportunity for the parents who have faced many challenges raising a child with disabilities, gave them an opportunity to really bond together with people who understood some of the challenges they had faced in sort of this like non-judgmental atmosphere. And also, my participants said something really similar, but they said that the social support from the group members was absolutely critical to them growing in many different ways. One was in terms of anxiety. They said, I had so much anxiety, I was avoiding so much in life, and to hear that others were doing the same thing, it almost gave them courage. So when any group member did something and took a step forward, it's like, wow, we can do this, guys, like we can achieve this. And the groups were very supportive. They would literally cheer each other on during our meetings and clap for each other. And really ask, and process with each other, what's going on, how can we help each other? They wanted more activities to interact with each other. So they really enjoyed this bonding experience and wanted us to even give them more opportunities for it. So I just wanted to give you some quick audio clips of what some of the social coaches said in general about the program.
A shared experience, because I know for me for a long time I felt really isolated with having a daughter that's autistic and has difficulties making friendship.
I like the emphasis on the positive thinking, both me and my son.
I liked the fact that there was meaningful problem solving, that it wasn't limited to positive thinking, that there were also, especially with the life practice, that you were working through realistic, these young adults often encounter in their real lives, and they were coming out with meaningful solutions based on their own experiences. They worked through it.
Okay, so you kind of got a flavor for some of the comments the parents were saying or the social coaches were saying. And then just lastly, this is some data. Again, this is preliminary data. We're still in the process of data collection, the second time point. So right now, this only includes 10 participants who went through active treatment. And their anxiety, we're already seeing some significant differences in their anxiety levels, and that it's actually this intervention, at least post-intervention, we're seeing reductions in their anxiety. And this is not quite significant, but we're starting to see reductions in depression. So this is very promising, especially given the sample size is so small, it's only 10. So we'll see how it continues over the next few weeks as we collect data and have final results. But Marjorie and I both would really like to thank a variety of people who made this program possible. First and foremost, the participants and their families. It was an absolute pleasure, woo-woo, getting to work with them. They're amazing. I miss them a ton already. Working with Steve Reuter, he's just woo-woo. He's an incredible leader of the social coaches, an amazing colleague. And then Marjorie Solomon, who helped in the whole design of this program and the development of it, and sort of consulting with me on all the clinical issues that arise during group therapy. Our amazing co-leaders, I'm not going to list them all. They are fabulous. I don't know if any are in the audience. I didn't look. But they're absolutely incredible. This is like one of our days. We took pictures. And then we have a variety of RAs who really have helped make this process possible in terms of the research side of it. We have many funders to thank, especially the main grant that funded this, the Behavioral Health Center of Excellence grant, and then NIH, an ROA that Marjorie has, the Marvin Buzz Oates and Family Foundation, and the Joyce Rayleigh Teal and Jim Teal Foundation. So, and lastly as well, Marjorie's extensive work she did on social skills development curriculum over the years, and how that really led to this program. So thank you.
It's interesting what you said about the intellectual level of the people that you were working with, because my child has Asperger's and she's very snobby about her intelligence. And so I can't get her to go to groups with other kids, but she was in one with other Asperger kids when she was in high school, and it went great, and they really bonded because they were all kind of oddball kids having a similar experience.
Yeah. That definitely was echoed in our group many times over. That we had some members say, this is the first time ever in my life that I felt accepted by a group, and that I really felt like I identified with people. So I think in that respect, it was very life-changing. Outside of like the actual lessons we taught them, just the group experience was very powerful and potent, and it made me appreciate even more deeply the importance of group therapy.
Thank you so much. I was wondering, I have two quick questions. So one, I was wondering if the participants in the study, were there any questions asking if they had gone through early intervention behavioral therapy, and if any preliminary data showing that that's actually impacting their outcomes? So that was one of my questions. I'm an early intervention person, so just wondering. And then also, wondering if there's discussion about having this for children who are a little bit younger, so older elementary and middle school.
Yeah, thanks.
The piece about early intervention, no, we didn't expressly look at that. Do we have histories on the folks?
We do have some data on it.
Oh,
the
good,
sample
okay.
size is so small, I don't know how much we can look at it. But anecdotally, what we heard actually from a few different people is some of them had received CBT treatment before through more individual therapy, and it wasn't as effective as the group therapy, and it's because of the group experience of hearing that others have anxiety too, and others have similar struggles, and others can overcome it, and it created this power that what I think was lacking in some individual. But again, this was for some people in the group. This is not necessarily the case for all people. I would never say rule out individual therapy, but there is a power in the group.
I think ABA, do you know if they had any ABA early in their lives?
Yeah, several had ABA, several had social skills. Actually, several had never received any intervention and had been diagnosed in the last 3 years. So we had quite a variety.
And then the question about the intervention for children that are in the teen years or younger. We have a social skills program. We haven't explicitly addressed teaching them CBT. And there are some manualized curricula that do Facing Your Fears curriculum, Coping Cat, and we've talked some about implementing those in kids that have been in our social skills program. But we do end up hitting on a lot of similar topics in social skills, relaxation techniques, problem solving, and so forth.
So I think you were asking how could young adults participate in this program. So right now, the group that we're starting in fall, we've already enrolled everyone for that group. And so right now it's at the research stage. I think one goal would be to see if it could ever transition more into a clinical program that's at the Mind Institute. It's not at that stage yet. And then a long-term goal would be for it to be really implemented in the community in different settings. So unfortunately, we're not quite there. We're more at kind of the initial stage. So I would say go on the Mind Institute every once in a while and look to see for updates. Oh, and if you like, you can come up to me afterwards, and we do have a waiting list that we can put you on, and we could contact you. It might be months to years, but we could put you on that list.
I have a question. I'm just wondering, I have a daughter with autism, and she's been in several social groups, but she's quite a bit younger than the kids you're describing. She's almost 8. Okay. And for me, it's very difficult to get her wanting to go or engage in any kind of social group, because it's really difficult to get her to see what the benefit is and what the value would be of it, other than to maybe like earn something out of a prize box at the end, or to, if there's another girl who happens to come, that's a big deal, and then if that girl has a similar interest or brings the similar toy that they could then see, then it's about like accessing that. But and I'm just wondering, have you seen something that correlates with like an age for when social groups maybe become about the actual relationship values, or?
Yeah, so, kind of the issue around social motivation you brought up was really relevant in our group even. We had some participants who their social coach, AKA their parent, drugged them to the group. And some of them were drug out of the group, meaning they didn't feel like they walked away with much value. But I would say that was a very small handful, and there was another handful who kind of came in, they felt like they weren't the ones who chose to enter. It was really a social coach motivating them to. But they got really engaged in the program, and they felt like it made a huge difference in the long run. So at this point, I don't really know what the factors were in those different individuals that helped one sort of see the value and others not. I think in part it had to do with the social coach relationship too. And I think as the social coach relationship evolved, and I'm dealing with adults because it's a bit different, but as they felt more independent and I think respected by the social coach, sort of their own autonomy, I think they were more naturally open to engaging in the program. It wasn't mom telling me to do it anymore. So that may have been a factor that affected, but this is adults, so I think that's a bit different. I don't know if you had a comment.
Yeah, I mean, it is always a challenge with girls. Generally, most social groups end up being with more boys because of the whole incidence of the disorder. I think that similar to the adult groups, we do find that after about a week or two working closely with parent and child, the vast majority of the kids in the social skills program do, at least at the Mind, do enjoy coming because we do enough activities that they really like. And sometimes, some years it can really differ. I mean, we've had 5 girls in a group in some years. So don't give up.
Yeah. How often are they?
The groups are once a week. Our social skills groups, they run, depending on the year, from between 20 and 30 weeks. If you want to get on the list, we can help you to get on the list. Like I say, some years there are more girls in the groups, and that does help some girls. However, I will say we had our person who came longest when people were still allowed to have their insurance and regional center pay for really long stays, and she was a girl. There were no boys and no girls in her group, and she became very good friends with one of the boys, who she still speaks to this day. So some girls really like being the only girl in the group too. So.
Would you have to have a more evenly balanced gender thing to talk about sex?
That's a really good question. I don't know if you would need to. Honestly, I think it's such a great need to discuss it. I wouldn't include that as a limiting factor. That is one of the, I would say dating especially, was one of the main topics that people in my group were saying we need a lesson on this. And when I gave them the ADIS, the anxiety clinical interview, I rated how anxious they were about a variety of things, and dating situations was like off the charts anxiety provoking for them. So it's really a topic they feel like they need a lot of knowledge about, and they're just highly anxious and they don't know what to do about it.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was created in 1998 with a promise to find cures for neurodevelopmental disorders. Every day, our physicians and researchers come closer to fulfilling that promise. Their groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other brain disorders are helping children achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.